Hey, good afternoon, guys. Sober Souls here. I'm Caleb. This is
Yeah,
Sam.
I'm
We got
Sam.
Andrew behind the camera.
Yo,
Yep.
yo.
Good morning. It's Saturday, May 23rd. We're coming at you live from Seattle, Washington.
Yeah, Sober Soul Studio.
Sober Soul Studio got it pretty much set up the way that we'd like it. Hope you guys are liking what you see so far, liking what we're talking about. Today, we thought we would talk about health in general and some things that we do on a daily basis to stay healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. We got a lot of stuff to cover, but I think we'll start off with, the physicality of it all. For Sam and I, we both have the same mental illness. We're both bipolar 1 and schizoaffective.
Mm-hmm.
And so, besides staying clean and sober every day, that's the most important. Talked about this yesterday. Second most important thing that we do is take our medicine as prescribed,
Yep.
right? So we don't end up in 5-point restraints in the back of a cop car, in the back of an ambulance, all that fun stuff. You wake up with fuzzy, grippy slippers and,
Yep. Yep.
and a gown that just doesn't fit right.
Yeah.
So I
It's got a
can't.
nice breeze though, don't you think?
Nice breeze,
Yeah.
breeze.
Yeah.
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 Especially in the backside. But anyways, I got tired of waking up in jail and in padded rooms and psych wards and things like that. So I quit drinking and drugging January 1st of 2012, and life has gotten really, really good. I actually got hooked up with my doctor before I got sober, and I call her my miracle worker because for years we tried different combinations of medications for me, and she's the doctor that finally got it right. My medicine hasn't changed much prescription wise in about 15 years. So that's where I'm coming from with the mental health. Turn it over to Sam.
No, shout out Seroquel.
Mm-hmm.
Sponsor us. We got two advocates right here.
Yep.
Yeah, health, mental health. For me, something that keeps me grounded and sane is right now I've been going to a IOP dual diagnosis treatment at Fairfax every day. Been doing that for about 5 months now. Something that keeps me grounded, something to make sure I'm on the right medication because, with the mental health aspect, if you're mentally ill, your life becomes unmanageable. And if you're not on the right medication, it's just pure fucking misery. All kinds of side effects, it was part of the side effects for me that I struggle with right now is like weight gain. It kind of makes the physical health, kind of a struggle, but it's something that I'm still working on because, we may be talking about different kinds of health, but, we're all not perfect. We're still striving to be better every day. Um, like Caleb was talking about, waking up in 5-point restraints and all that, I've done that. I've been in the back of an ambulance handcuffed, you know, being in a straitjacket. That's no fun at all. And some people say that, you're not sober if you take medication, which, I think is complete bullshit because, it's how can you have a manageable life if your life is unmanageable by your mental health? Um, yeah. So,
Yeah.
you got something?
Well, I'm just, thinking like along the lines of what you said, it's usually the older generation, that is a little bit more narrow-minded and not quite as open-minded as some of us younger generations. And I'm not saying that I'm young. I turned 44 this past week on Wednesday, so I'm no spring chicken, but I've seen time and time again, people trying to get clean and sober. And, if they have a mental disability, they get on medicine and they start doing better. And then people tell them that they're not sober because they're taking medicine. And that's the kind of stuff that kills addicts and alcoholics,
Yep.
because, we're all living one day at a time. Right. And, if somebody's new to sobriety, and they're taking their medicine as prescribed, as far as I'm concerned, they're sober.
Yep.
Okay. We're not doctors.
Nope.
I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Nobody in this room has that kind of qualification.
Nope.
And so it's only a mental health professional that can tell you, yes, you're sober, you're taking your medicine, you're not doing any street drugs, you're not drinking, taking medicine as prescribed, you're sober.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else that's is really good besides having a psychiatrist to have those medications properly evaluated and prescribed is for me a therapist because my therapist shout out Scott if you're watching, uh something about me and my therapist is my therapist specializes in complex PTSD and childhood trauma and uh for people like who are just getting out of jail and people who were in the street life because he was also an addict when he was a kid and he got sober when he was 25. Me, I'm 27, and that's when I'm finally getting sober. I mean, I've been trying since I was 24, 20, probably 24, maybe 25, but I've been trying for a while. Um, and having that, you know, once a week regular routine scheduled therapy is for me is what also keeps me sane and able to sit with my emotions. I'm learning different coping skills, a lot of grounding techniques. My favorite grounding technique is the five senses, where it's five things you see, five different colors in the room you're in, four things that you can hear, three things you can feel, two things you can smell, and one thing you can taste. And that's a good grounding technique for me, at least. Also, something for me is cognitive diffusion, because your thoughts and yourself are kind of fused together, and sometimes you get stuck up here, right? And you have all these thoughts, but it's really you need to separate, diffuse those thoughts. So it's cognitive diffusion, saying that this is my brain saying this isn't me. It's separating yourself from your thoughts, because we are the observer of what is going on in our head, and that's where a lot of us get mixed up in, at least for me.
Yeah, same for me. Friend of mine told me years ago, he said, you don't qualify to think. He said, you're too damn smart for yourself. And he said, as far as your mind goes, he said, don't ever go up there by yourself. That's dangerous territory for an addict or an alcoholic, to be up in their head. And if you're all up in your head, you're not thinking straight. We can let our emotions get the best of us, but that's a choice, right? Just like
Hmm.
just like my mother always says, choose joy today over pain. Choose faith and love over hopelessness and things like that. Another thing as far as the mental health goes is being active physically. I recently joined a gym.
Same.
Sam did too. I think we're going to try to get Andrew in the gym some too. And I'm not able to do everything that I want to do because of my back injury, but I get on the stationary bike and go for about an hour. It's about 13 and a half miles, and I burn up about 550 to 600 calories every time I do that. And I'm going to get back in the routine of going at least 3 days a week. Get those endorphins going.
Yeah.
Get a good sweat going. And it's amazing when you work out like that physically and exhaust yourself physically, it helps. Well, it does for me. It helps me
Yeah.
sleep better at night. Days that I get up and go to the gym, and spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever, at the gym doing mostly cardio, I sleep better those nights because I'm physically tired. So
Yep.
wearing myself out physically, whether it's, at the gym or going for a walk or playing baseball or shooting hoops or whatever it is, the more physical activity that I get, the better I sleep at night because my body is tired. And like what Sam was talking about, trying to separate, our thoughts. Um, a lot of the stuff that comes into my head and comes into my mind is garbage. It's bullshit.
Hmm.
I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. My first thought, reaction, response, whatever, to just about anything is always going to be drug addict, alcoholic. But if I can recognize that for what it is, then I can dismiss it and start thinking about something else. So,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at with the physical stuff. What do you think,
Yeah.
Sam?
I mean, same for me. It's my hip injury. I got arthritis in my hip, arthritis in my spine. So working out isn't always the most enjoyable activity, but it is a mandatory activity because it does release endorphins, and serotonin in your brain. Makes you, like you're talking about, the physical tiredness, so you can actually sleep better. It's good for your recovery. Um, that's something I'm still working on. I'm not perfect. Something where you can see I'm drinking a Dr. Pepper right here, but it's zero sugar. So I'm trying. I'm trying. It's like what you said earlier, just means it tastes like shit.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I like it. Physical health is very important. Something else I kind of talk about is spiritual health. Because for me as an addict, I also relied on myself as my own higher power when I was in addiction, and that got me nowhere. And actually having to have something greater than myself to rely on and fall back on is, a great relief, and it's really powerful. Because I'm not going to sit here and say, God's real, God's this, God's that. I'm not a preacher, but um
Mm.
I am an ordained minister, but I don't do anything with that. It was just to get my buddy married. Um, for me, it's God is the shape of the blanket when you throw it over the invisible, mysterious force that transcends all states of consciousness, dead or alive. I learned that from the manager of ACDC. I saw that in the video, and that's something that really stuck with me. And having that higher power, it could just be a doorknob. As long as it's something that is not yourself, that's what it needs to be. Because if you don't have anything to rely on or fall back on, you got nowhere to go but down.
Yeah, since the beginning of time, we've been trying to understand, who God is. Um, there's lots of different religions out there. There's lots of there's lots of different, ways of acknowledging God in your life. That word God scares a lot of addicts and alcoholics because they get this idea in their head of, something that is not real, you know.
It's something that
So
you have to believe in that's not even you can't have proof of.
yeah. So that word God can mean good, orderly direction. It can mean group of drunks. It can also mean grow or die, and also good, orderly direction.
And group
S-
of drugs, group
Yeah.
of druggies.
And group of druggies as well,
Yeah.
right? So in the beginning, so long as there's something in your life, and like Sam was saying, we don't know exactly what God is. None of us do, right? Um, but if you're into that, something that has helped me a lot has been prayer. And I'm not the best at praying. Now, my dad was a Baptist minister when I was a kid, and he was right up until he wasn't. And my room was also his study. It was a small house in Fort Worth, Texas, back in the '80s. And I came in one evening and I said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm studying. I'm going to have a new job." And I said, "Oh, great. What are you going to do?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to put people to sleep." And I said, "Well, that's what you've been doing." So that's what he does. But anyways, on that, um, like I said, so long as your higher power isn't yourself, it could be a tree, it could be the sun, it could be the world.
The
So long as it's
universe.
not you,
Yeah.
and prayer is something that, we work on a daily basis. I have several prayers that are memorized that I say just about every day. And I get up in the morning and I ask my higher power to direct my day and to keep me clean and sober for one more day. And then at night, I thank God for keeping me clean and sober for that day. And I think about, did I wrong anybody today? What could I have done better? Do I owe an apology? Is there something that should be shared with another alcoholic immediately? Something that I need to get off of my chest. And that's the great thing about recovery is, I have real friends today,
Hmm.
friends that are there for me through thick, through thin. They don't judge me. They don't tell me that they're better than me. We pick each other up when we're down. I have more friends today than I've ever had in my life. I'm close with my family again, which is something that I got really far away from in my addiction. About 20 years ago, I wanted to move as far away from family as humanly possible and still be in America. I didn't want to go to New York because I can't stand Yankees. Sorry if you're a Yankee, um,
Go Mariners.
but but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. What I'm thinking today. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I agree. Boo Yankees, go Mariners.
Mm.
Um, I understand like the whole spiritual aspect is hard to grasp and understand, but this is the aspect of one day at a time, and sometimes it's even 1 minute at a time, 1 second at a time. I may not use a minute from now, but for this minute right here, right now, I am not going to use. Sometimes for me, when I first started out, that's what it had to be, and asking God or my higher power or just an acronym for God, to have God's will do my bidding, have Him show me the path in life that I am meant to take. And that's something that's very important for me. Andrew, you got anything on spirituality?
This moment, no.
No?
Surprisingly not.
Yeah.
I've been trying to find my own spiritual path so far. So, but I agree completely along the lines of what you guys been speaking about.
Yeah, does anyone else had a white light moment?
A couple months ago, I was pretty upset because of my living situation. I haven't worked in a couple of years because of my back injury, and I want a better life for myself and for my daughter. So while I've been out of work on my back injury, I got my commercial driver's license, and so when I go back to work, that's what I'm gonna be doing. And it was only because I was clean and sober that I was able to do that 6 weeks and have that to kind of fall back on. At the same point in time, what I was getting at is I was in bed a couple of months ago and my kid was with her mom and I was, by myself in my apartment and I was in my bed reading a book and I thought to myself, is this all there is? This little one bedroom apartment, that my daughter and I are sharing. Me not working has affected my self esteem, my sense of self worth, and as far as accomplishments and whatnot go. And so I was just really upset. And I was starting to get emotional and I got a little choked up. And I swear I heard a voice as clear as I'm talking to you people right now. And the voice said, "Son, it's not going to be this way forever." And like I said, I heard that voice as clear as day. I was stone cold sober. It was in the evening. I was thinking straight. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't my imagination. It was God. And I've had several experiences like that in my life, but just him saying, "Son, it's not going to be like this forever." That was enough at that point in time, for me to move, for me to get over that feeling of hopelessness and understand that, you know, God has a better plan for my life than even anything that I can fathom, right? And I believe that. God either is or he isn't, and God is either everything or he's nothing. And I choose to believe that he's everything.
Yeah.
God's worked miracles in my life, definitely. The three of us should not be here. We've all overdosed. We've all gone to the edge,
Yeah.
just right up to the very edge. And a lot of us, have jumped off that cliff. And, suicide is something that runs pretty heavy in my family. About 6 months ago, my mother's sister, my aunt, took her life. Back at the beginning of COVID, my cousin took his life. And today I'm, definitely not going to take my life.
Yeah.
But those were people that were like us, addicts and alcoholics with mental health issues that were not dealt with properly, which led to suicide. And I wish that I would have known that my aunt was going through what she was going through. I wished I would have known that my cousin was going through what he was going through. I don't blame myself, but I do wish that I would have been a little bit more, into their world and what was going on with them. And so that's my bad. But I've lost a lot of family and friends since I've gotten sober. If you're going to be in sobriety, if you're a girl, you need a black dress. And if you're a guy, you need a black suit because you're going to go to some funerals.
Yeah.
And that's just the way that it is. And so every day for me is a new day. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to be alive today, to be here on this earth, free to roam around and do what I want to do, and that's my daughter right now blowing up my phone. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam.
Yeah. That reminds me of a story or an experience I lived through. Yep, here. Something for me. I remember I overdosed on nitrous and I was paralyzed from the neck down for 5.5 months, 6 months. Couldn't move, couldn't walk. I couldn't even go like this with the lighter. I remember at that time I was still smoking weed, and I had to have a candle and dry spaghetti noodles and trying to hold the dry noodle in my hand and light it with the candle, and then put it up to my bong and smoke it up. But for the amount of strength that I had, it was minuscule. And I remember I have my 4.5, my Ruger. Don't worry, guys, it was registered to me. It was registered to me. But I had my buddy. I had him load it for me. I had him cock it back so there was one in the chamber ready, and I asked him to leave because he knew what I was gonna do. And I grabbed the 4.5. I put it to my head, but because I couldn't even use a lighter, I couldn't pull the trigger. And I just remember sitting there crying because I wanted to kill myself so fucking bad because I didn't know if I was ever going to walk again. And for me, it was God spoke to me and said, this too shall pass. That was a moment I had to heavily rely on a higher power, something than myself, because I couldn't even physically make myself even walk. And also with the suicide aspect and, the self-esteem, your mental state, all that. It was terrible. It was something I never want to experience again. It was the lowest moment in my life. But also I remember having a white light experience, like people talk about for when their life flashes before their eyes, if they have a near-death experience or something like that. For me, it was when I died in the boat accident, like I had no pulse. I remember seeing the white light, and I could go up to it. And this isn't something I'm making up, this is something I actually lived. I could go up to the light and I could see myself having an out of body experience. And I remember, I didn't want to go because I was thinking of my mother, and I didn't want to do that to her. And I think it was God's will. This is something I'm connecting right now because I always told myself there's a will, there's a way. And I always said that it was my will to still be here. But no, it was God's will for me to still be here. That's what it was. That's the only reason I'm still here is because of God's will. And I think you got a story about that, where you had your life flash before your eyes, weren't you, on your motorcycle?
Yeah. Motorcycle's gone. I've had a couple of motorcycles, and I love to ride, and I'm a good rider. I'm not a great rider. I'm not a professional. I'm not a racer or anything like that. But last summer I was on my motorcycle, and I was on my way to meet up with some people, and this little old blue-haired lady in a Cadillac just about took me out, and I was only about a mile away from my home. So, um, I didn't wreck, but I was making a right hand turn, and I had my blinker on, and I had looked in my side mirror and I didn't see anything, but I looked over my shoulder as I had been taught to do. And, right before I started into my turn, this little old lady in a Cadillac went bombing by me. She can barely see over the steering wheel, and she's probably in her 70s or 80s and wasn't paying attention, never saw me, never slowed down, nothing. But that was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. If I would have started into that turn, if it would have been another second, maybe 2 seconds, I wouldn't be sitting here, and she would have taken me out. So, on that note, at that point in time, that was last summer, I decided that it's extremely selfish of me as a single father of a 10-year-old girl to be riding a motorcycle. And so a couple months ago, I sold it. And there may be a point in time in my life whenever I'm older, whenever Maddie's older and can take care of herself, that I may ride again. But for now, I thought it was extremely selfish of me. So sold the motorcycle. Happy about that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's real good.
But yeah, just for a few seconds, I saw, I was knocking on death's door, and like I said, just another second or two, if I would have started into that turn, she would have taken me out. And, something else, every time I turn around, it's either a friend or a friend of a friend or somebody, that's gotten in a bad motorcycle accident.
Yeah.
They're a lot of fun. I'll give it that. But they're extremely dangerous, especially in a city, as big as Seattle. We have some of the worst traffic in the whole freaking nation, right? And riding a motorcycle in that kind of traffic, it's no fun. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of mental and you know, you got to be on the ball all the time, you know, and it's a little bit more lax driving a car. You
Yeah.
know, you got four wheels on the road instead of two. And you know, like I said, I enjoyed riding, had a lot of fun, would go up to Whidbey Island with my friends and ride. But at the end of the day, it's just too dangerous, too big of a risk for me to take right now. So I'm
Yeah.
happy about that.
Yeah, I got a buddy who just wrecked his Ducati. He snapped his leg over 5 times,
Mhm.
broke every bone in his hand.
Mhm.
You know, lucky to be alive. You know, those things are dangerous. But going back to what we're talking about, to recap on everything we talked about spiritual health, physical health, and mental health. You know, is there anything else that we want to touch on before we wrap up, guys?
Just emotional health, you know, and then being in check and being, you know, being clean and sober, we feel, right? So we have this emotion. So emotional sobriety, you know, is important to recognize a problem, find the solution, move out of the problem into the solution is just as much, spiritual as it is mental, as it is you know, spiritually, you know, and that emotional support. You know, when I'm down, I pick up the phone and call my dad, you know, or I call a friend, or I call somebody in my family. And you know, when I'm emotional, you know, I let myself sit in that emotion and feel that emotion, right? And so I'm just becoming every day more and more aware of a higher power in my life, you know, doing for me what I couldn't do for myself.
Amen to that.
Mhm.
Amen to that. Andrew, you got anything? All right, well then,
Let's wrap it up. This
let's
is,
wrap it up.
yeah. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
We hope that you're enjoying what you're seeing, and we will be back. So keep tuning in. Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
Like, share, subscribe.
Yeah.
Sober
So-
souls.
souls.